I started using drugs mainly out of curiosity.
I found a bottle of whiskey in her wardrobe.
And by 15 I was using drugs like ecstasy and speed.
And I moved into hard drugs when I was 18.
Basically, I'd sort of come home from school and I'd be locked out of the house.
The drugs like heroin and crack I started using when I was about 19.
No drug that I took ever made me a better person. I think they probably served a purpose at the time. I was deeply unhappy.
There's a lot of denial. I think it took me about 6 months of injecting heroin to finally cotton on that I didn't have the flu the whole time.
And I became very ill when I arrived back in London. I was actually withdrawing.
And that was really, really catastrophic. It was awful for everybody concerned because I knew I didn't need to do it, and yet I couldn't stop.
She always admitted that she was an alcoholic.
My family asking me to leave and cutting all ties with me was a pretty bad moment.
I actually stole from my own mother. I stole a credit card and was using that again to fund the habit.
More desperate, I took more drugs, more destructively, and really, really hurt myself and everybody who cared about me. Destroyed my life again.
She probably went through about 10, maybe more detoxes.
There are lots of bad things that happen day to day when you're on the streets and trying to score drugs and use drugs. So it was just a very dark time towards the end.
It was traumatic, it was devastating for my family. It also affected my children, of course. You know, they had to go to school knowing that their mother and father was a heroin addict and that Dad was, you know, all over the place, in trouble with the police. You know, and it wasn't just about that, it was about my children sort of seeing the police kick the door in, for instance, and arrest me, and there was all these kind of horrible situations which they had to witness.
She always blamed me and my brother and said how much she hated us and stuff like that, and said it was all our fault, and, you know, unless we were nice to her, you know, she'd commit suicide or something like that.
They took everything. They took everything, absolutely everything. My life shut down. There was nothing in it in the end, apart from drugs. Nothing that I enjoyed or was good for me or that I cared about.
It was a relief for my mum to ask me to leave, as I was living with her for a time. But she spent every night waking up wondering if every phone call was the police. So it was very stressful for everyone in my circle.
You know, there were times when I used to go to bed on a night hoping that I would not wake up, because every day was a nightmare, because I knew that when I woke up I would be feeling ill and I would have to go out and make some money. And it wasn't just money for heroin, it was money to live because we had the children with us. We couldn't claim benefits because we knew that the police would trace us. So really, I mean, it did take us to hell and back.
When I stopped this time, I would have been content to stay at the rehab and sweep the leaves off the drive if it just meant I didn't end up locked up somewhere again. You know, I really had lost a lot of belief, particularly in myself, not in, you know, in other people, but in myself. And that was about the sum total of my ambition.
I think that's a myth that drug users on the street are sort of off their face the whole time, because you just can't. Well, I just couldn't get enough money together to use drugs how I wanted to, which was to be in a semi-unconscious state the whole time. I felt, although I must have been sort of not with it, I felt as though I was sober the whole time. It was awful. Just spending all day getting the money together just so you can feel normal, just so that you don't withdraw from it. That's what it felt like.
And then a couple of hours later, I was awake then, obviously, through the trauma of finding my mum with a split open head. And she came at me with a knife. She thought I was, you know, she was hallucinating and seeing green men, as she called them. But the majority of the time, she was just properly tripping. It was really bizarre. You just couldn't tell what she was going to do next. So you sort of hid away from her at the same time as sort of having to watch her. Yeah.
Actually, I was teaching yoga in Wandsworth Prison, and a guard said to me there, one of the guards said, it must be really hard never being able to drink again. And I was no, what's really hard is having nowhere to live, is, being in a mental hospital, is destroying your family. That's the hard stuff. If the only thing I can't do today is have a drink or a drug, then actually I'm pretty well set up, I think.
It was at that point, I don't know what made it happen, but it was at that point that I realised that if I did not sort my act out, I was either going to die or leave the legacy for my children, knowing that, their father was a heroin addict and a thief. I'm actually working for local services. I work for the Primary Care Trust. I really enjoy it, and I'd say straight away the best thing about my work is that most of the clients I can relate to, and we have a fantastic relationship. And I think, in a sense, it's really good because I've realised now that, I am inspiring some people to change.
It's completely different. It's like unrecognisably different. Because, I look completely different. But also, I got married since I've been in recovery. I've studied and worked since I've been in recovery. I finished a course in footwear, and I'm happy and I'm calm, which is like a major difference from virtually my whole life up to this point.
One of the areas we've obviously been interested in has been young people and their involvement with drug use. That's not just because young people are obviously important to us because they're the adults of the future and they may be our son or daughter, but we're also particularly concerned because of the steady increase in the extent of drug use, both legal and illegal drugs, amongst young people today.
We work with people themselves who have drug and alcohol problems, but we work with their families too, because as you might imagine, people's families can experience substantial stress and distress when someone in the family has a drug or alcohol problem.
One thing that we'd like to see would be for an alcohol worker to be placed in every accident and emergency department, every primary care and possibly even every sexual health clinic. Because there's some really strong evidence to show that if we can engage people at this teachable moment and then refer them for a brief intervention with an alcohol worker, that can actually reduce alcohol consumption.
Action on Addiction is the only charity that's concerned with issues around addiction other than helping people once they've got into trouble.
Any independent research on addiction is a positive thing, because it's a very misunderstood condition, and I just want to help speak out about it and destroy any stigmas, as I'm sure the shame surrounding addiction of any form keeps people sick.
I have gained quite a lot of strength from the work that Action on Addiction do. They've really inspired me in lots of ways, and I really enjoy working for Action on Addiction.
With our shared commitment and funding support, we've been able to show these are real, achievable goals where lives are saved and the quality of life is hugely improved by this work. They wouldn't have happened without the shared working with Action on Addiction.